toward the One, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the messenger, the spirit of guidance. Well, welcome. This is the 6th of our series of 10 classes on becoming a human divine being. So, a bit in the way of review to get us started. Typically in the history of spirituality, up until the present time, for most spiritual paths, the choices on the menu were either to be in a dualistic, separated state of consciousness, which we can call our default setting. It's usually how most of us go through the world, feeling separated from everything that we're experiencing, perceiving ourselves not only separated from what we're experiencing in manifestation, but separated from the divine or the transcendent or whatever we may think of it as. And then the other choice was unity, which was, for many spiritual paths, the ultimate aim or purpose of those paths. It was to return back to the One with a dissolution of any separate sense of identity, just merging. And it's been given many different names in different traditions: mukti, moksha, enlightenment, nirvana, salvation, and so on. And we've talked before about something called relational unity, which is new to many people. It's the third choice on the menu, and it's not being separated. It's not being merged. It's not the humanness just disappearing with the divine taking over. So it's not that. It's not merging into the One. It's a state of being in relationship with what we are experiencing in a way that's, you could say, permeable. There's a circulation between the two. We say, both in spirituality and also science, that everything is interconnected with everything else, and that everything has an effect on everything else. In that sense, the whole universe is entangled with itself. And so the effects that take place in one location or one time can have an instantaneous effect throughout everything. So relational unity is something that we learn to be able to experience. We have to go through a process of being able to release our very strong hold on identifying solely with ourselves as being a physical being with our experience of reality limited to what comes through the senses and what comes through our thoughts and concepts about what we're experiencing, what comes through our emotions in response to what we're experiencing. So we've talked along the way, and many of you have been with us for the 2 previous series on birthing your resurrection body and living in the resurrection body, and now this series of becoming a human divine being. So we've talked about ways of not only working with practices that help us to experience relational unity, but ways of relating to our experiences in everyday life that, instead of causing us to constrict and react to difficult circumstances, we can discover that those are openings. We've said that everything potentially is a portal to the sacred, but it all depends on our way of relating to it. And as I've said before, that doesn't mean that magically the external circumstance is going to change, but your experience and what is now possible in the midst of that circumstance is going to change. So instead of the former ways of spirituality with the aim of merging beyond life, Hazrat Inayat Khan, when he brought Sufism to the West, brought a teaching, a form of Sufism where the emphasis is on awakening in life. And he talked about the message being awakening humanity to its divinity. So We've also talked about what is the life that we are awakening in. And initially we might think, well, the external life is just the same, but now we're realizing something different about ourselves. And that's kind of a starting point, but we discover along the way that the only way that process of awakening can take place is if we begin to experience ourselves as existing on many more levels than just physical manifestation. We discover, as Hazrat Inayat Khan said, that the human is the only being that exists in every level of reality, that we are truly multidimensional beings, and it is possible for us to experience what we call in the Gabriel light work multimodal consciousness, that we are in all these different possible vibrational states of experience, but our consciousness can be focalized in a particular level, a particular plane of consciousness. And when we do that, the world, the life that we experience opens up. I've previously talked about the research of William Tiller of what happens when you have subtle energy coming into ordinary reality, and now things are possible that weren't possible. Well, that's the science end of what happens with our spiritual awakening. We are enabling a reality to blossom forth, that things can happen and that couldn't happen before. So this is all in the way of a brief summary of where we've already been, kind of the highlights of the process that we go through. And a few other things that we've talked about many times are the Barzakh, B-A-R-Z-A-K-H, or we call it the meeting place or the interface between the manifest and the transcendent, the meeting place between the human and divine parts of our being. And all the action takes place in what the ancient Sufis call the intermediate world. This is the in-between world in which the human and divine meet, and now something can emerge from that. And all the teachings we've presented so far are about the resurrection body. That's the fruit of that interface, what's possible for that, and what's built in that interface. We've talked about Tawil, which means harmonic perception. And when I first learned about Tawil, and for many years, I thought that what Tawil meant and all that it meant, which was plenty already, was being able to perceive the archetypal nature of whatever it is that I was experiencing. So if I was sitting with a flower, I would be experiencing the archetypal reality of that flower beyond what the flower looks like and smells like and my thoughts about it and so on. But again, that's just a beginning point. Tawil is described as harmonic perception. And to enter into that kind of relationship with what we're experiencing, that space is opened up. We couldn't experience that deeper nature of what it is that we are connecting with unless we had also opened up to that deeper nature of ourselves. So that's what the reality is like in that way of relating. So again, this is where we've been. This is what we've been working on. Do you want to say anything?
Sure. In regard to harmonic perception, one way of describing it, according to the Zoroastrian tradition, is that things and beings of the earth raised to incandescence allow the apparition of their angels to penetrate to the visionary intuition. Imagination unveils the hidden reality. So speaking of the deeper levels or the other realms, they're speaking of them as in terms of angels. And one more, talking about harmonic perception, they in the Spiritual Body, Celestial Earth book, Henry Corbin used the analogy of an organ with many different pipes that resonate. As you know what a pipe organ would be. Thanks to stops on an organ, each note can cause several pipes of different lengths to speak simultaneously. More and more overtones are heard as one ascends through to the upper register until a certain pitch, the fundamental note, resounds simultaneously. And this is called progressio harmonica, or harmonic progression. So this is the kind of thing that's, we're talking about opening up what is in back of the things that we see in the material world. There's different ways of speaking about that. And as Azarbash says, that part of us needs to open up in order to effect that process. And again, this is part of the imaginal faculty that we've been talking about for a while, and developing that. Tawil is a very important part of that.
And with that in mind, I'd like to read you a little bit from Alone with the Alone by Henry Corbin, but it's about Ibn Arabi's teachings. So he talks about let's say we're meditating before a flower, or he says a mountain or a constellation. The aim is not to discover what obscure and unconscious force that those manifest, but what divine thought flowering in the world of spirits is epiphanized, is at work at them. So in the process of Tawil, we're not just perceiving this deeper nature of something, we're enabling it to express itself. And last week we did a meditation on experiencing everything as being Gabriel, announcing itself. And this is another way of saying the same thing. When we can engage in this process of Tawil with something, then we are allowing ourselves to be open to the place where revelation takes place, and whatever it is that we are in relationship with and experiencing now can truly reveal its living divine nature, not just a static fixed property. It's what's emerging through it. And also from Ibn Arabi, he talks about that, we've talked about Himma a bit, which is the creative faculty of our heart, Himma. And he says that this faculty enables, the ancient term is Dhawk, Dhawk, which literally means tasting, and the esoteric meaning is direct experience of divine reality or mystic perception. And he says it possesses the capacity to transmute all the objects of our sensory perception. So what does that mean? It means something that appears to have a static reality now becomes a living reality through this modality of perception. So this is an important principle. We think of sight, we're seeing something, it's a passive experience, but this way, this modality of seeing brings something, the capacity of being in its own living expression of itself, coming back to us. Okay. So what's new, and this is a inspiration just from the past several days, having developed the capacity of harmonic perception, what's the next step? Pure Light was always talking about the next step. Well, the next step, and this is a new term that has come, is enabling what I call harmonic relationship. Tawil is harmonic perception that has an active capacity of enabling something to express its state of being. And harmonic relationship is now us being capable of being in this state of relationship with whatever it is that we are experiencing. Well, let me back up just a minute. Pure Light would talk about that which transpires behind that which appears. And so this is that which transpires within that which transpires behind that which appears. It's like the world of the soul. It's the world of the resurrection body in which everything is in this state of harmonic relationship with everything else. Everything, as it's said in the different mystical traditions, is a unique form of God, is an expression of divinity. And in this world of the resurrection body, everything is a living embodiment of a particular aspect or way of relating to everything else that shines through. It's the way it announces itself. It's the way that it is Gabriel. And we're going to be doing a practice in the second half of our class tonight about experiencing ourselves as being that Gabriel that is bringing that unique light forth that has that transformative effect on what we are experiencing. So we can become capable of, in this state of being catalyzed. Something is triggered at us by whatever we're in relationship with. It's like what we receive from that, the effect of the light of that on the light of our being. But also, we become a catalyst for what we're in relationship with. We have a transformative effect on what it is that we are experiencing. That light of our being now is triggering something in what we are experiencing. And it's unique both ways. The Sufis talk about the light upon a light. So we could pick up here.
Put everything. I wanted to say a little bit about what you're saying, though, because it's so beautiful. And I want you all to know, too, that in our discussions in between times, you know, there are opportunities where we're thinking of this creative, imaginal faculty and really surprising each other and ourselves with what comes through. We aren't satisfied anymore with the same practices and same ways of doing practices, and are encouraging you too to think about what you can bring, a different way of looking at it, or a different way, as if you're relating to a friend. What would that kind of practice be? Because the practices, as you remember, the wazaif or wazifas say have a beginning ya, which means oh, that you're greeting the being of this practice. So it's like a relationship, just like we're talking about the relationship here. And it's bringing this catalyzing idea to everything in our lives. All opportunity, all potentials that hadn't been there before because of this deep work together that we've been doing.
So a good place to do the practice.
So right. So let's do some practices. Of course, in a different way than we've ever done them before. We're going to do one practice that most of you have heard of, Fazl, F-A-Z''L, which means harmony. A wonderful thing to go with what you're talking about too, Azabash, and also with what we might need in the world right now. It's saying that it's be a different way of saying it, in that usually we will say it on the breath, perhaps, and also with our breath as we say it aloud. We would say, usually Fazl is said on its own, but when you can use it as a wazifa and say ya in front of it also. So I'm going to say it with ya in front of it. So just listen for a little bit and you'll get the idea of this practice. Ya, Fazl, ya, Fazl. Also, it is like a sound current that you say, so it's okay to draw it out somewhat as you say the sound, and it's like hearing the harmony of the whole of existence, and even increasing the harmony of existence. Ya, Fazl, Ya, Fazl. Also, the Z kind of disappears after a while, and almost sounds like Fazl, Ya, Fazl. Ya, Fazl, Ya, Fazl, Ya, Fazl, Ya, Fazl. One more. Ya, Fazl. Now let's pause. Now the big change in this is going to come with extending it way beyond what you think you might be extending, saying it. In other words, we're not even going to be worrying about the breath as we're saying it, because we're going to say it without our mouths moving. in our imagination, you might say, or silently. And we're going to be saying it longer than you've ever said it before. We can do that because we're not worrying about the breath. So I'm going to say it right now, and I want you just to notice, and I'll tell you when I start and when I stop. And I'm going to say it, since it's silent, we'll just say Fazl. Okay, so I'll say it. And I'm breathing in now and breathing out. And one more time, breathing in and breathing out. And one more time, breathing in and breathing out and finishing the word. So this is very different for us, isn't it? The reason for it is to feel an extension, to feel that it is reaching out to all those in manifestation, especially all those in this world that we are in, and bringing harmony to that world. So if you were hearing my thought, my speaking within, you would have heard me saying just fa, and then continue on. But no breathing in, because you don't have to. Why? Because we're using that imaginal body along with our other body, or you can say your Kirkalia or Barzagi body. So that part will be saying it for us. So I hope you all have that. So we're going to say it. We're going to start now saying Fazl and extending it outwards so long that you could breathe in, out, in, out, in, and out, and then we'll finish the L. So here we go, saying it. And finish the L. So now we're going to say it a few more times. Why don't you go ahead and say Fazl 3 more times, but saying it in this way. Feel that extension and feel, as he was saying, we're all interconnected, and how this is meeting that being, that presence of all these other beings, and it is catalyzing in all these ways. So here we go. Start another one. You don't have to force it, just let it be gentle. It's almost like it's saying itself. And one more. Amen. Now let's just feel the effects of this. Okay, and so to go with this practice, I've chosen Ya Karim, which means kindness. something else that is sorely needed in our world today. So Ya Karim, Karim. And we're going to do this the same, similar kind of way, but in this one, rather than feeling that we are the source of the wazifa being emerging from our being, we'll just think of it as uh, a whole network, a whole, there's another word for that, a whole, okay, a field of kindness. But it is a large field of kindness, and you might feel that perhaps as you're working with it, you might feel it extending outwards, um, just from your view outwards into all of the world. There's a huge field of kindness. And we'll do it in a similar way as we did the last practice, in that it will extend out. Let's say breathing in and out, in and out, in and out. And it'll be said silently, but continuously. So let's begin with Kareem. Saying it 3 times altogether. In, out, in, out, in, out, 3 times. Okay, let's pause there. I want to remind you too, it's a little bit different for us. And so sometimes we start associating it with the breath. But again, you're breathing, but the current is just continuous. This time, let's try it a little different and think of it as coming from the whole world towards you. And you are perceiving it and blessing it as it comes into you. So it's like a receptive wave. And it would sound like ka, more than what I can do with my breath, because it's not on the breath. So it's extending in, maybe into you, and how about into the higher realms? From the world around you, towards you, in through you, into the higher realms. Let's do it that way 3 times again. The breath has nothing to do with it. You keep breathing, but the current is continuous. So here we go, Kareem. And now just feel the effects of it with this beautiful combination of these 2 wazifas. So I invite you to be creative with your wazaif and your practices. Find other ways that you can share your own uniqueness uh, with all the realms of being. I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah. So a comment, just a general comment about working with the wazifas. As we've said before, we are interconnected with everything. We are in relationship with everything. And whenever we work with a particular divine quality, whether it's Fazl, which represents harmony, or Kareem, kindness, or Jamil, beauty, then that practice becomes the modality by which we experience the relationship. So if it's Jamil, we're opening up our way of relating to everything through the divine beauty in this living relationship that brings to life beauty in everything, and then the reflection from that to ourselves as well. And then just a few comments before we have our first break for a period of sharing. We realize that those of you who are participating in this series, whether it's live or whether you're watching the recordings at a later time, have very different levels of experience. There's some people that this is fairly new to. There's other people who've been doing practices, particularly with Sufism, for decades. And so everyone is, I mean, sounds kind of silly to say, everyone is where they are on your own path, which is exactly where you're supposed to be. And so a lot of what we're sharing in this series, and this is the third series of these classes, is very advanced. Some of the teachings and practices are very advanced. So if there's some things that we share and you're going, well, I'm just not quite sure how to make sense of that, or I really haven't had an experience of that, or when we present practices, we try to sometimes give like different ways of working with them, like here's the basic level and here's a more advanced level, but just don't get discouraged and don't compare yourself to what other people are experiencing. Like when we have sharing and someone may be describing a wonderful vision they had, and you might be thinking, well, what's the matter with me? I'm not having anything like that. Everybody is totally different. Some people have many, many visual experiences in their journey towards awakening. Other people may never have one. That doesn't mean they're not evolving just as much. And a lot of times we are trying to bring things back to our usual modality of perception to evaluate them, but the way that we're experiencing in these higher states of being is very different. I mean, it's just a quantum leap beyond our usual way. And so it may come to us in a very different way. It may come in a way that, well, I've shared that sometimes I experience what I call downloads from the divine, where I'll get like this very condensed chunk of inspiration that feels like it's got enough potential material in there that'll take me a year to really unpack it all. And so I have to allow time to be there for it to open up, instead of going, well, I should just be able to understand all of this at once. We have to progress to a level where we can release where we were and open up to the next level that's coming. So with that in mind, we're going to have a period of sharing. So it's recording. Okay. So the theme for this second part is, and here's the sentence that came to me, so you've got a resurrection body, what are you going to do with it? So in other words, what's the purpose of this? We talk about the Sufis say that the purpose of creation in the first place was the divine was a hidden treasure, desiring to be known, to be loved, to love and be loved, and so on. And so manifestation was created in order that that process could be fulfilled. So the divine is continually seeking to know him, herself through us. But is that all there is? Well, that seems like quite a lot, but what part do we play in this? We've talked over and over about the importance of realizing uniqueness, that each of us is a unique soul. Each of us is a unique expression of the divine. Ibn Arabi says that each of us is a unique embodiment of a divine name. And I think I talked last time in mystical Judaism, they say that every combination of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet is a unique name of God. And there's more permutations of all these letters than there are electrons in the universe. So, and another way of saying that everything, even every electron, is a unique expression of divinity. And Hazrat Inayat Khan says that every atom will have its moment of awakening. So the first part of this grand story that goes on forever, we are everlasting beings, as Pure Vilayat says, which means we had an origin, we were created, but we go on forever, as opposed to the divine, which is described as being eternal, always has been, and always will be. So this whole process of creation and evolution and awakening, of us becoming capable of entering into this relationship, of coming to the Barzakh as more and more complete human beings, more and more multidimensional beings that are enabling so much more to come through this interface that could come through otherwise. But what does that mean? What arises from that interface, the way that the original divine impulse is changed by our experience in life, brings something forth into this world of the resurrection body that brings forth a new wisdom that was never there before. So the old way of thinking about things is that there's just, the divine is omniscient, God knows everything, everything that has been, everything that will be. And I used to really think, well, that was the gospel truth, that was the way it was, but I don't believe at all that that's the way that it is. I think the divine being is just as much engaged in a process of discovery as we are, and we become capable of participating as human hyphen divine co-creators, co-experiencers, co-bringing into emergence of things that have never been known, of possibilities yet to arise. And in this way of harmonic relationship that I talked about in the first part of this evening, where we experience everything as being Gabriel, everything announcing itself. Well, the other side of that is we are equally Gabriel. We're equally bringing forth something of the divine being that could only come through us. And it's not like, well, even Arabi says we each have access to a unique way of divine wisdom, which is true, that no one has access to. And I think if even Arabi were here, he would agree with this thought that each of us embodies a unique way of divine relationship with everything. Each of us has a unique way of relating to whatever it is that we're experiencing, whether externally or in the inner realms, that is, there's not another one like that in all of existence. And that way of relationship is what opens up new things, new possibilities, and there's no end to it. Ibn Arabi says that there is a new creation at every instant, and he says that the new creation is always similar. There's a similarity to what's been before, or boy, it would be a pretty confusing world, but he says it's never identical. There's always been something that's changed. And why is there always something that's changed? Because everything in existence is bringing what's been gleaned from its experience in the previous instant of creation to the next instant. And to the extent that we've become awakened beings, I mean, consciously participating in this process and bringing our own desire into that process. Another way of saying that, we are living our dharma, our spiritual purpose in existence with a capital E. I mean, the deeper reality in which we always have existed, but we've been asleep to it. We're usually, in a sense that this world sometimes is described as being like the dream of God. And I think, well, if we want to use that as an analogy, then just like in a dream that we can have a lucid dream. We wake up in that dream, and then we can change things in the dream because we know that we are creators of our experience. Well, we can embody the divine awakening in this, its own dream, you could say, its own creation of the divine imaginative faculty, the cosmic imaginative faculty. When we learn how to utilize our own individual imaginative faculty, then we become miniature embodiments of the divine creative process, something that can only come through us. So this is, many of us are familiar with the alchemical process. And the alchemical process is generally thought of, sometimes there's 6 stages of it. Sometimes it's brought into 4 stages, but it's thought of as being, well, we start where we are and we undergo these shifts along the way. And the outcome of that is we end up being very different, which is true. I mean, the alchemical process is very transformative, but we tend to think of it as an individual process. It's what's happening to us. And I think at some point along our journey, we come to realize that what we thought was an individual process is actually our participation in the divine awakening to itself. So it's our participation in the alchemical transformation of the human divine relationship. First, just ourselves as human divine beings, but later being able to be in this state of relational unity with many, many other awakened and awakening beings that are now enabling the divine to awaken in a way that would not ever be possible. And this is real important, so I'll say it a couple times. No matter how enlightened a great being is, and you can make the being be Buddha, you can make it be Christ, Moses, and so on, and they certainly have had their tremendous impact on the world. They're considered Rasuls, I mean, like divine messengers. But I think now what's happening with the evolution of human consciousness, and even I think it's significant how the wording of the invocation, we are allowed to change, if we like, instead of saying, who form the embodiment of the master, the spirit of guidance, we say, who form the embodiment of the messenger. Well, the messenger is not any one of these beings who's been. I think now the meaning of the messenger is we are all parts of the, we could say atoms in the body of the divine messenger that now is the, you could say is the resurrection body of God that is able to experience manifestation by this deep connection with manifest beings and the divine side of things on a cosmic level. What can only take place through many, many people being able to network their way of having consciousness with each other that's not local, that maintains uniqueness, but at the same time is harmonized with other beings with common intentions. And I firmly believe, and I've said this before, this is the only way that the world is ever really going to significantly change. Because humanity's been struggling with problems ever since there have been human beings. And now we have the capacity to make the problem so much worse because of technology. But no matter how many separated individuals who are operating out of their individualized dualistic consciousness, no matter how well intended, it's not to say they shouldn't be doing this, there's a need for this, but the possibilities for what can take place when there's a collective awakening to a higher state of consciousness, and now people can connect in that way, I think only then are there going to really be solutions to problems that have been intractable, that have not been able to be solved. And I think that's what's going to bring about the transformation of the world. In a sense, we could say that this cosmic alchemical process is the divine operating on itself in existence, changing itself pulling itself up, so to speak, by its own bootstraps in this relationship. It's evolving itself. And we're each a part of this. We're each a part of the divine being in communication with, in relationship with every other expression and part of the divine being. And when we're able to be in that state of harmonic relationship, now what comes through all the cross connections of the unique light of ourselves onto the other and the light of the other back onto ourselves is bringing out a furtherance of the divine wisdom that could not take place otherwise. If there were, and this thought came to me, if there was a voice in this process, it might say something like this: this is the cosmic I am eternally at the cusp of the latent possibilities yet to be known. And we talked about Ishq, the divine nostalgia. Here, Ishq is the divine longing for more revelation of what is yet to be. So it's, yes, it is the Ishq we feel for that restoration of that connection with the beloved, but there's a different Ishq. There's an Ishq that's an outward pull. I call it the eliciting light of Sophia for what has not been, what is yet to be, what is yet to become, that each of us is a co-creator of. So we are participants in the furtherance of the divine being awakening to itself. Murshid says that the message, as I said, is humanity awakening to its divinity. And I might add to that we could say that the message is a process of us becoming capable of participating in the divine awakening to itself. And in that sense, each of us is a living embodiment of the message, the unique way the divine message comes through us, made available to everything else, and becoming capable of being receptive to, of being able to receive the way that the message is expressed from everything else towards us. And so we're going to do a meditation at the end of this, after Ravani Ross shares some about the experience of us being Gabriel.
Okay. So, incredible, beautiful unveilings here, Azarbaj. And I want you to know that we get to a certain point, hopefully within these classes and during a lot of your meditations and doing practices, and then we lose that. We get back into many things, that old hats kinds of things, and driving us down. And wanted to address just for a moment here what we call an annealing process. In the alchemical process, and in working with metal also, there's a process of becoming adamant so that the things who have been transformed stay at this different level. If you know about the Hall experience, meaning just having a taste of something that's in a higher realm, if things do not become adamant or hadn't been annealed, then they just drop right back down to the old realization. So we want things to continue at this higher level, and there are really things that can be done to help that annealing process. As far as I'm concerned, when we learn about the Barzakh, and when we learn about the fact that that which we love, that which we have accomplished in our lives, all those realizations and all those improved communications and this higher energy actually goes into producing this resurrection body that we've been talking about. And if we think about that realm, and that there's this collection of all of this that we think is lost a lot of the time. We think, oh no, that's gone now. I've lost that whole thing. No, if we know that it is now gathered in the realm of the Barzakh. It is becoming that spiritual body that we will inhabit when this material body falls away. If we just realize this, then that is part of the annealing process, just knowing that it is there. And also the connection to the beloved, as we've been speaking, the angel, the personal Lord. We have this other part of our own being, and I'm about to read a poem about that to help to anneal the process here. That being is receiving for you in the ways that perhaps, because we are on the front lines and because we are very rapidly transforming in a way that only humans can, this more angelic part of ourself is doing that other work, is gathering that in. You can think of all of that has been created almost like this material or cloth, or like from the plants that have produced all these beautiful essences are all being gathered in there. And if you use that as a focus in your meditation, you can feel that kind of gathering that continues, so that now you're not just dropping back down every time. It's continuing as a maqam. That's the other word, hall and maqam. Maqam means a station, so that we're more likely to stay on this station and not drop all the way back down where we were before. And something else that has to do with that process is also the noticing those things that do drop you down. And again, like Azarbash said, every place is a possibility for a portal to the divine. So even those things that we do habitually, or we feel bad about ourselves, we're guilty, self-consciousness, things like that, we watch those things. If we look carefully, there is a clue in there. There is something, even in a relationship with someone else, there's something new in there. And we're just so used to looking at it in the old way that we're not seeing that new thing. So look at it with new eyes and see what that might be. So, a little psychology here in the midst of all of this spirituality is a very good thing. So now I'm going to, yes? Okay, sure. Ready?
Well, I'm going to say a little bit more first.
Thank you.
We probably can each think of so many things. We think, well, this didn't have anything to do with my spiritual awakening, or this was wasted. And from one point of view, you could make an argument for that. But from another point of view, I'm thinking about if you've read the Buddha's description of his enlightenment, he had a recollection of thousands of past lives, all the way from being insects and plants and different animals and so on, and different human incarnations. And you might think, well, boy, what a long road to go down to get to where he got to. And these other things didn't have a lot to do with where he ended up. But from another perspective, which I think is an accurate one, all of those experiences and lives of the Buddha are still existent. I mean, the Buddhist frame of reference began with just being in a particular time sitting under the Bodhi tree, but his consciousness opened up to where all of these things are present, the other lives he had, and so on. And it was because of everything that ever happened to the Buddha that he arrived at his state of enlightenment. All of those were essential parts. So in the big picture of our life, the tapestry that's being woven from our life, including the sorrows and the setbacks and so on, and the battle scars, all of those are, if we have a way of relating to them differently than perhaps we have been, all of those are essential parts of our journey of awakening. They're parts of the allegory of our soul. And so if you were having a book that's the allegory of your soul, it wouldn't be a very interesting book if you just had the last 3 pages and you went, the rest of this is not very interesting. I think I'll just throw it away because this is not very glamorous and I didn't look so good over here. But this is all part of the story. It's a living story. It's all part of, in the world of the soul, all this is happening. everything is continuing to have an influence on everything else. So now I want to share a meditation about last time we did a meditation on experiencing other things being Gabriel for us and being in that state of receptivity to receive it. And so now we're going to do the second part of, you could say, this practice of experiencing ourself as being Gabriel, which each of us is. Each of us is an embodiment of the divine message coming through our way of relating to everything. And in that sense, each of us is a divine messenger to what we're experiencing when we enable this state of both harmonic perception and harmonic relationship. So go ahead and close your eyes. And I can just imagine the thoughts that some of you are having. Well, that's pretty highfalutin stuff. I couldn't possibly think of myself as being that. So that's okay. So in that case, let this be a what if meditation. So you're going to act as if that's the case for you. Try it on for size. And what you're trying on for size is just accepting it as a reality that you are an embodiment of a unique blend of divine qualities and expressions of the divine desire that have been transmuted through your being, and a unique flavor of light that comes from your being whenever you are experiencing anything. It could be just something that you see or hear or touch or taste. Anything that you're having an experience of is a result of, you could say, a transmission of light. So feel yourself now, as you sit with your eyes closed, you're receiving the light of stars billions of light years away. You're receiving cosmic rays. You're also, just like the space that you're sitting in has electromagnetic waves of TV stations and radio stations and wireless internet going through, it's all there. It's all coexistent with everything else. And within that same space is the living transmission of those beings that you have an affinity with. And those of you who are initiates in a spiritual group, and some of you are initiates in the Anayatiya, were initiated into a linkage with this transmission of the great Sufis who have been in the past that still live beyond this physical world. So we're connected with that transmission. And we have the capacity of opening to the transmission of any great being that we have an affinity to. It could be Christ, it could be Buddha, it could be Krishna, it could be Muhammad. So we're allowing ourselves to receive that light. But as I described earlier, in this state of harmonic perception, it's not possible for us to be in a state of harmonic perception unless we are living from that deeper aspect of our being. And in that deeper aspect of our being, just as much as light is coming to you, let's say from these great beings, they are receiving the light of your being that carries with it a property of catalyzing something in them, even in the most enlightened being, that they never could get just from their own separate self. Something is added to them. So feel yourself, and at first you might be thinking of just a light shining out in all directions. And that's okay as a starting point, but Ravani Ram mentioned the idea of a field earlier. So I'd like you to instead think of the fact that if we're truly interconnected with everything in the universe on every level of reality, then just like those radio waves and TV station waves and so on are connected with every single thing that they pass through. They're present everywhere. So are we. And so this unique light of our being, this unique way of relationship touches everything, everywhere, every time, beyond space. And so feel now that if you enable this awareness in you and you can just gently open to it, it's your true state of being. You don't have to work hard to get to it. And feel the divine transmission that comes through you to all of existence. You're part of the message, part of the divine messenger. And as that unique way of relationship, that unique way of light connecting with everything, triggers off new realizations, everything that you are experiencing. Now something comes back from everything you're in harmonic relationship with. And you can say, just as you've served as Gabriel, now everything you're feeling is being Gabriel to you. And it's the revelation that comes to you by virtue of what you've enabled and what you're experiencing. So the revelation is just as new to whatever it is or whoever it is you're experiencing as it is to you. It's a fresh dispensation, and feel the effect of that coming back to your being everywhere. And just feel this quickening, not just happening in your physical sense of self, but every level on which you exist, in touch with everything that exists. And as if this is not wonderful enough, there's one more aspect of this. And it's what is brought back to your personal Lord, your personal angel, the unique wisdom that now has been created through this relationship, and it's brought back to the divine, who now has further awakening to itself by virtue of what you've contributed. The returning light has been enriched exponentially. And the new creation that arises at the next instant now has possibilities present for the first time. And we navigate through those possibilities by our desire, by our love. We'll close with the modified version of a Buddhist prayer with the thought of love. Let us encompass the world, and may the world encompass us with that divine love. And may that love increasing without measure encompass the whole universe now and forever. Amen.
Amen.